Mira and HarlequinAudio present Talulah's Back in Town by Brenda Novak, performed by Amy Mcfadden. To Maureen Fink, it was so wonderful to meet you at my signing in Boston. Thank you for your love of my books, for introducing your friends to my work, and for writing to me with such enthusiasm after reading each new release. I've enjoyed the family pictures you've shown me and interacting with you since then via email and in my book group on Facebook. It's always such a pleasure when a faithful reader becomes a wonderful friend. 1.
Well, if it isn't the runaway bride.
Talulah Barclay glanced up to find the reason a shadow had just fallen across her plate. She'd been hoping to ease back into the small community of Coyote Canyon, Montana, without drawing any attention. But Brant Elway, of all people, had happened to come into the cafe where she was having breakfast and stopped at her booth. "Of course you'd be the first to bring up my past sins," she grumbled. They hadn't seen each other for nearly 14 years, and he'd certainly changed, filled out what had once been a spare frame, grown a couple of inches, even though he'd been tall to begin with, and taken on a rugged, slightly weathered look from spending so much time outdoors. But she would have recognized him anywhere. The crooked smile that curved his lips suggested he was hardly repentant.
I'm not likely to forget that day. I was the best man, remember?
She wasn't likely to forget that day either. Only bumping into her ex, Charlie Gerhardt, would be more cringeworthy. She felt terrible about what she'd done to Charlie. She also felt terrible that she'd repeated the same mistake with 2 other men since. Admittedly, jilting her fiancés at the altar hadn't been among her finest moments, but she'd had every intention of following through, until the panic grew so powerful it simply took over, and there was no other way to cope. It said something that, while she regretted the pain she'd caused others, especially her prospective grooms, she didn't regret walking out on those weddings. That clearly indicated she'd made the right choice. A little late, perhaps, but better not to make such a huge mistake than try to unravel it later. She doubted Brant would ever view the situation from that perspective, however. He'd naturally feel defensive of Charlie. He and Charlie had been friends for as long as she could remember. She'd hung out with Charlie's younger sister, Avril, since kindergarten, and could remember seeing Brant over at the Gerhardt house way back when she and Avril were in 5th grade, and he and Charlie were in 7th. Dressed in a soft cotton Elway Ranch t-shirt that stretched slightly at the sleeves to accommodate his biceps, a pair of faded Wranglers, and boots that were worn and dirty enough to prove they weren't just for show, he rested his hands on his narrow hips as he studied her with the cornflower blue eyes that had been the subject of so much slumber party talk when she was growing up. Those eyes were even more startling now that his face was so tanned. Had he lived in Seattle, like her, she'd assume he spent time cultivating that golden glow, but she knew he hadn't put any effort into his appearance. According to Jane Tanner, another friend who'd hung out with her and Avril, the 3 of them had been inseparable. Brant's parents had retired, and he and his 3 younger brothers had taken over the running of their 2,000-acre cattle ranch.
What brings you back to town?
He asked.
You've laid low for so long. I thought we'd seen the last of you.
Pretending that running into him was no more remarkable to her than running into anyone else, she lifted her orange juice to take a sip before returning the glass to the heavily varnished table. My Aunt Phoebe died.
That's the old lady who lived in the farmhouse on Mill Creek Road, right? The one with the blue hair?
Her great-aunt had been a diminutive woman, only 5 feet tall and less than 100 pounds. But she'd had her hair done once a week like clockwork, still used the blue rinse she'd...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?